Welcome to the Law School Toolbox Podcast. Today, we're talking with legal recruiter Liz Stone of Stone Legal Search about ways to proactively manage your career from law school onwards. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan, that's me, and normally I'm here with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today, we're talking with legal recruiter Liz Stone of Stone Legal Search about ways to proactively manage your career from law school onward. So welcome, Liz, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Allison. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So first off, can you just give our listeners a sense of your background so they know a little bit about where you're coming from?
Yes, I graduated from law school in 2005, and I litigated for about 6 years. I started at Pillsbury, and then I was at Goodwin Proctor, and then Buchalter Niemer. For the last 5 years, I've been a legal recruiter in the Bay Area, and this past fall, I opened my own search firm, Stone Legal Search. Thank you. And I am also the chair of the American Bar Association Legal Career Central Board of Directors. And that is a group of legal professionals that, and with a career focus that provides practical career advice to lawyers of all levels in all practice areas. And when I am not working, I perform stand-up comedy at night.
Nice. And if somebody wants to find out more about the board that you mentioned, how can they do that? I'm not really familiar with this, to be honest.
So our website is abalcc.org, and there are tons of resources for all kinds of lawyers at all different stages in their career. And there's also live webinars that you can attend and a file of all the past programs that we've put on.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It is a great resource.
Now, you work primarily at this point with mid-career lawyers who are looking to make some type of a switch, or they probably wouldn't be talking with you. So when you talk to these folks, what advice do you wish that they had taken earlier in their careers, and what should they have been thinking about sooner?
Well, one thing I think every lawyer should understand is how competitive the market remains even as you get further into your career. And this applies even for people with the best credentials who've been at a top firm, say for 4 years. Accepting the fact that your next job still might be a stepping stone to get to your long-term career will really help people plan their move. And I really advise everyone to stay apprised of the market, even as a young lawyer, because you want to understand realistically what your options are instead of working for 4 years with an idea in your head of what you're going to do only to find out it's not realistic. That will really set back people's job search or career transition. So really thinking sooner about what you want out of your career and then continuing to talk to people as you have ideas so that you can figure out how to set yourself up to get there.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that sounds great. I'm like, okay, I'm a third year at a firm. I'm thinking maybe this isn't going to be my lifetime career path. I should find out about the market. How do I do that?
So people call me to ask questions all the time. Definitely having a relationship with a good legal recruiter is helpful. But honestly, your own network is always a great place to start. So people who have been in your job and moved on to something you think is interesting, reach out to those people, either people that you know or ask for introductions. Keep your eye on what moves people are making that are posted on LinkedIn. So if you see someone get an interesting job, you can talk to them and find out what they did to get there. Because usually when someone when you see someone make an interesting move or get a job that looks really good, they didn't just accidentally land there. That's very rare. Usually they've made a lot of effort and maybe they've taken a class on the side. Someone retooled themselves as a privacy attorney to get in-house. There's usually extra steps people have taken. So talking to people who've made a good move or an interesting move, or has already gone through the process, will put you light years ahead in your own process.
I think that's true. I mean, I remember a friend of mine who actually wrote a series for the Girls Guide site on how she not only left a big firm, but she also left litigation. And it was a fascinating process because, you know, she was just sort of discontented and realized being a litigator wasn't really what she wanted to do, but she had no idea what to do next.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a fairly long process where I think she took a leave of absence, and then she volunteered as a DA, and, you know, she did a bunch of stuff, and then finally lands in-house at a job she really likes. But it was kind of fascinating because it wasn't, you know, if you looked at it and you're just like, oh, you know, she went from Quinn litigation to being in-house. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But it wasn't
always
like...
looks so simple. It always looks so simple. But when you start talking to people, you find out it really isn't. And I always talk to people who are practicing law and interested in getting into recruiting or professional development, because I went through such a long process to figure out what I wanted to do instead of practicing law, that I feel like the background information that I have that helped me make a decision is really useful and can save someone all that time just by referring them to resources and giving them just the insight that I got. So, you know, I try to help people out who are looking for information as well, just to save them some of the time I spent on it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are willing to do that. I mean, I sometimes get emails from people who are interested in becoming an entrepreneur, you know, and they're like, well, how did this happen? And I'm happy to tell them. I mean, you know, like, why not? Like,
yeah, exactly.
People like to be appreciated. And if somebody comes to me and genuinely wants to know, like, you know, how did you do this? And do you think it's a good idea for me to do a similar thing? I mean, I'll tell them what I think. I may not be right, but I'll at least try to help.
Yeah, I remember my husband was a litigator for 8 years at a firm, and he really wanted to move in-house. And he got together with an attorney that he had worked with at a firm who had had 2 different in-house jobs. And from the outside, it seemed like she had just stumbled into these amazing jobs that were the most sought-after jobs at a tech company. And he found out that the first in-house job she got, she had been contacted by a recruiter and she had really specific experience that this company wanted. But then she made a list of up-and-coming companies in the Bay Area that she might ultimately be interested in working for one day, and was really tracking the business of these companies. She identified one company, and I don't want to say it just in case, you know, people could figure out what it is, but a really hot company in the Bay Area, and began going to every networking event where either she saw the general counsel of the company would be or suspected he might be, so that she could build an in-person relationship with him. And 2 years later, when a litigation position opened up at that company, she was able to send her resume directly to the GC. And obviously was first in line for that position. And in addition, had done extensive research on her own about all the legal issues that company was facing. Wow. So she was able to be an expert in this area, even though it wasn't part of her practice. So it was really a long game and plan that she had to get that job.
And I think that's a great point you make, that even after, sometimes we tell people, oh, you know, your first legal job is the hardest one to get. Like, don't worry, after this, it'll be easier. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, these are people who are highly qualified from great schools, have great credentials, and they're still hustling.
Exactly. And I really think that people who work really hard and network to get their first job are better poised to handle career changes down the road because they've been through it. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes someone who's done really well in school and is the top of their class and got this, you know, summer associate position that led to a big firm job, they tend to feel like they have every advantage on the market. But then when they're a fourth-year associate and want to go in-house, then they find out how important networking is and how important really preparing for interviews are and understanding the market. And they're a little behind the ball on that. Whereas I see a lot of people who had to really work for that first job, and by the time they're ready to make a job change, they know the whole process. They're able to dive in really fast and give themselves every opportunity on the market.
I think that's a great point. So what do you think people should be doing not to get, I mean, I guess basically not to get lazy in that first job, even if they're not quite sure, like, you know, maybe they don't have a 5-year plan or they're not sure exactly what they want to do, but just to sort of keep their options open?
I think every lawyer, no matter what they may think they want to do when they start practicing, should really do something to stay involved in the community beyond their own firm, because the worst advice comes from people who are at the current job, right? Because they're still at that job. So I see, and I kind of made this mistake when I was at a firm and I thought maybe I don't want to do this. I would talk to the senior associates and junior partners, and they were
maybe
always
not
saying,
the wisest career move, Liz.
yeah, I mean, they're like, well, I mean, yeah, this job is pretty terrible, but every other job is terrible too. But they had never had another job or another career, so they had no idea. And I was finally like, I don't think these are the people I should be taking advice from. And I talked to so many attorneys who are just talking to people at their own firm, and they're just getting advice from people who are risk averse or not interested in looking to move or are too scared to take a risk themselves. And so, I think if you are able to stay in contact either through your own network or, really joining an organization that exposes you to people with even if it's the same practice and in other firms, that's really helpful. But the broader, the network is, the more exposure you're going to have to people at different phases of their career who have gone down different paths. You're going to see more options that are out there. And I think one thing that is so important is seeing people who've made a career move that makes them happy, because they can really give you some context and say, no, I felt the way you did and I thought there was no other option, but then I did XYZ and now I'm really happy. And if you're only talking to people in your immediate, work world, you're not going to get that perspective. So it doesn't have to be a ton of time, but being involved in a bar organization, being on, especially if you're on some board of directors where you're working closely with other people, I think all those things can be helpful.
Yeah, I think also pro bono work is a great way to kind of reposition and meet people in different areas. When I was thinking about leaving the firm, one of the things I was thinking of was actually opening my own practice doing family law. Well, thank goodness I took a pro bono case for two reasons. One, because I made some amazing connections, including with someone who was, a leading practitioner who I had her helping me on this pro bono case. And I went to her office when I was still working, and, she asked me, like, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you realize you should quit that job and open your own practice. And I was like, well, actually, I'm thinking about doing that. And so we had this really interesting conversation, where she's like, I would help you, like, other people would help you. Like, we want to see the next generation of lawyers succeed. Like, do this. In the end, I hated the pro bono case, so it told me I didn't want to practice in that area, which was also really valuable to know.
Also very helpful, yes.
So I did not spend several years going down that path and then realizing I didn't really want to do divorce cases.
Yeah. And another thing, not everyone is able to take pro bono cases at the place that they're currently working, but there are so many good conferences out there. And if you attend a conference and, even if you pay for it out of pocket and you go to a conference and you get enough information to learn you actually don't want to do what you thought you wanted to do.
Good to
That's
know.
incredibly valuable. And I actually did that. I thought I wanted to get into professional development at a law firm. Mm-hmm. And I was really interested in professional development, and Goodwin Proctor had the leader in law firm professional development at the time. And he was so helpful and kind. And he directed me to a PD NELP conference. And I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to network. I'm going to get all this information and find this job. And it was not too far into a 2 or 3 day conference when I realized, okay, this is not going to be a fit for me. I am not patient enough to do this work at a law firm. And if I'm going to be in a law firm, I think I'd rather be doing litigation. And I was demoralized because I thought I had found the answer, and it was so hard for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And in hindsight, it was so great that I attended that conference and was able to rule out an area that I thought I might, be interested in. And it helped me find the right thing faster. So if you don't have a chance to do pro bono work and there aren't people that are doing what you think you might be interested in, there is probably a conference somewhere on it, and I recommend finding it and attending it.
Yeah, or even just CLE. Your local area is probably going to have CLE or online CLE on just about everything. If you think that, trademark law sounds so cool. And then you can't force yourself to sit through like a 3-hour CLE on the basics of trademark law, then it might not be your thing. The right fit.
Yeah. And also, I do think that the CLE programs, anything you can find online, if you're not able to meet people in person, is going to still be helpful. But to the extent you can meet people in person who do what you're interested in, it is so helpful to figure out if that is a potential fit, because different areas of law, different working environments really do have kind of different personalities. True. And if I'm a pretty hyper person, and I would say patience is not my strong suit, although I recognize that about myself. So I'm always working to dial it back. But if I end up in an environment where it is clear it is really slow paced, and it's clear that everyone around me is a little bit on a more mellow wavelength than me, I'm probably going to be pretty annoying in that environment. Like, that's probably not going to work out.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I did.
So
And when I left the firm, I did go to a bunch of CLEs in person for that reason. I just wanted to meet people. And, people are there for a reason. Either they practice in the area, they're interested in practicing in the area. They're generally amenable to like, oh, that was really interesting. Do you want to grab a coffee at the break? They're there for a reason. They're there to meet people too. And you can kind of see like, okay, are these my people or not my people? I don't know.
Exactly. I think meeting people in person all the technology that we have is great. Obviously, we are recording this podcast remotely. We're able to do this, but I encourage, especially all young attorneys, to really make an effort to meet people in person, because you get so much more information. And if you're networking, people remember you so much more if they've met you in person than if, even a phone call, and definitely more than an email. So,
for sure.
Making that effort goes a long way.
Yeah, and once you've met in person, you can always follow up, like, hey, here's an article that I thought you might find interesting. And they're like, oh, that was that nice person I met at that great conference in San Diego,
Yes, definitely.
All right, well, let's back up a little bit. So what are lawyers generally looking for when they talk to you? So presumably people are basically talking to you because there's some sort of dissatisfaction, right?
Yes. I can't stress enough what a huge range it is. I am in a position where I just see just how different everyone's goals and priorities are. And it's really important for everyone to remember that there's no one job out there that is going to make everyone happy. And I have a lot of lawyers say to me, okay, well, I wanted to hear about the market. Can you just call me if you have something that's really good? I'm pretty happy where I am, but I just want something really good. And
like, what does that mean?
I'm like, I have no idea what that means to you, because some people want a work-life balance and being able to wrap up their day at 6 p.m. is their priority. Other people want more money. Some people want more meaningful work. Some people want to be really engaged in their work and they don't mind working a lot, but they don't like the billable hour system. And everyone has just different interests and different priorities. They have different career goals. Some people, their location is living in their location is a priority. So they're like, I'll take any job I can get in California.
Right.
Other people, it's a practice area. It really varies. So one thing lawyers have trouble realizing is that everyone's not living in their head. So what they talk about, what they're thinking about or what they talk about with their friends, it just doesn't apply to everyone. And if they're going to be talking to people about finding another job, they need to be able to clearly identify their priorities and also be able to identify what sacrifices they're willing to make. And because there's always going to be a sacrifice. And so if you want to get your first in-house job, you're most likely going to have to compromise on compensation, possibly the level of work. Sometimes people have to take a step back before they can move forward. If they switch from a law firm to in-house, location, it just depends on the market and what sacrifices you might have to make, but you need to know personally what's going to work for you and what's not.
Yeah, I know for me, when I was deciding to move back to San Francisco after my clerkship, I had very simple requirements that a lot of people actually, I talked to people who were like, this is crazy, like you are being too restrictive. But my primary primary thing was I did not want to commute. So I was essentially like, I want a litigation job that is in downtown San Francisco. I will not interview for jobs in Silicon Valley. And, I had worked at firms that were perfectly willing to go have me work in their Silicon Valley office. It would have been super easy. They were nice. Like, it was all done. And I was like, I don't want to commute. They're like, it's 20 or 30 minutes. I'm like, I don't want to commute.
No.
And it's not 20 or 30 minutes.
It is not 20 or 30 minutes. That's
certainly not
crazy. Now. Definitely not now. And that is a huge quality of life issue. So I work with, the commute has gotten so bad between San Francisco and Palo Alto that there are firms that don't want to consider people with a San Francisco address because people will say, I'm okay with the commute. And then 1 year later, it has worn them down. So those kinds of things are really important. But I also know people who've been commuting for 10 years and they get up really early and it's no big deal. So that's an example of something that is a very important factor for some people and not others, and is going to be really important for your job search.
Yeah, I just knew for me, like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
But, it drastically limited my options. I think I interviewed at 2 firms, and, one of them wasn't really hiring. So, it was like, okay.
Yeah. And when people talk to me with a lot of restrictions, I worked with a candidate who was moving from Chicago to Los Angeles. And at first he said, and he was doing mostly private equity work in Chicago. And he said, I want to be in an entertainment law group in Los Angeles. And I was like, okay, you're not going to be able to make that happen in one fell swoop. It's just not going to happen. Los Angeles is filled with people who have been networking since before law school to get into this market. And you have an amazing resume, you have amazing credentials, but that's just not how the market works. And I can give you a list of jobs that would consider you, and you could use that as a stepping stone to get down there, join some organizations, start networking, and eventually make that transition. And he's like, you know what? No, I'm only gonna apply to a job that is my dream job. And I was like, okay, I probably won't be able to help you. And 6 months later, he called me back and said, I think you were right about the market. I think I'm willing to broaden my search. And he managed to get to LA and loves his job and said, I thought I wanted to do this specific thing. Then I interviewed at this firm and it turned out it was such a good fit. I don't even want to do that original thing anymore. And, he's up and running at the new job and really happy. But he had decided to broaden his search, and it kind of turned out that the location was ultimately more important than that specific practice area. It just took him some time to realize that.
Right, which I think happens. We all have our dream, and then we're like, well, maybe this part,
exactly.
Maybe I could give a little bit on this, maybe I could give a little bit on that. So say I'm a law student and I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, that sounds great. This guy knows he wants this exact job, but I'm not really sure what type of career I want to have. What type of things should I be considering right now in law school if I'm going to be able to set myself up for this later happiness and success in my dream job?
Well, great question, because as I just said, there's no one size fits all perfect job for anyone at any level. So the more clear you are on your current priorities, so it might be location, it might be practice area, it might be lifestyle, figure out what is important to you right now, and maybe what you think is going to be most important to you right when you graduate law school, and then start networking with people who have that and find out what skills and experience they think are necessary. So if you're in law school in San Francisco and all you want to do is live in Chicago, you want to know what the legal market is like in Chicago and what kinds of practices are really busy in Chicago, what kinds of practices are appealing to people hiring in Chicago who might be less inclined to hire someone from California. What can you do to make yourself more appealing to the work in that location? If you know you want to do patent law and you're in law school in Ohio, where are the busy patent law practice areas? If it's, if you have a computer science degree, the Bay Area is going to be a great place to look for jobs. If you have a life science degree, San Diego is going to be great. So even just if you're able to identify one thing that is really important to you and then start networking and researching from that point, you're going to be able to focus your search, but with good information, and then be open to the fact that your priorities and goals may change. There's hardly anyone who 10 years out of law school is exactly doing the same thing they thought they wanted to do in law school.
Yeah,
I mean, there are some of those people, but more often than not, there are not.
And they're few and far between. I know a couple of people who I can think of one person I know who came to law school with a very specific goal, positioned herself the whole time to get that job, has that job, likes the job, is keeping the job. I mean, most people are 180 degrees from where they started out.
Totally. I mean, I went to law school with this guy who everything he did with his OCI research was geared on making partnership. Which firm was he going to have the fastest track to partnership? What was the partnership path? He met on his own with tons of senior associates who'd moved firms to find out how partnership played into it. He was at Latham, I'm pretty sure, for less than 6 months before he went and started his own company.
Yeah, that's
good for him. Good for him. He's doing great. But it's just an example that the best laid plans, So it's great to start with your current priorities, but the sooner you realize while you're practicing that your priorities have changed, the sooner you can get to something that will make you happy. And that can be very hard because there's such an investment. You put in the time for law school, you put in the time to get the job, you're committed to doing a good job. It can be really hard to acknowledge, you know what, I'm where I tried to get to, and it turns out I don't like it here very much. But
yeah, that happens a lot.
It happens a lot, and it's hard to wrap your head around, but the more people you can talk to who have gone through it, the more you realize, okay, I'm not crazy, I'm not a quitter, I'm not, it's just that is part of life, and I think lawyers have a harder time with it than other professions because a lot of people go to law school because they're risk averse, and then law school makes people more risk averse, and then practicing law makes people even more risk averse. So, lawyers just have a harder time making those leaps than other people, but they're out there doing it.
Right. And I think also the whole system kind of beats people down so much that, I hear from people who are like, well, I really would like to stop doing this legal job, but nobody else would ever hire me for anything. And it's just okay, let's just put away the last 5 or 6 years where you've been highly qualified and gone to law school. Let's just back up before that. Someone would have hired you then.
Yeah.
So they're going to hire you now.
Yeah. And it's just, it's not always immediate, and it's not always, you don't always get your dream job right away.
Right, they may not pay you what you're making now, but they'll hire you.
Yeah, but you can set yourself on a path to get there.
Yeah, and the thing that I found interesting, I'm at the point where people I went to law school with are starting to be in that are they making partner stage? And it's almost never the people you would have expected.
I know.
You're like, wow, this person stuck it out and they're a partner? Wow, that is really surprising.
I know. And it's funny because, I left a firm after 6 years. And even by that point, which is fairly early on, I had still stuck it out so much longer than
that's
all these people.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and these people, and when we were in law school, I was like, I don't know if I want to work at a firm. I don't know what I want to do. And then I was like, well, these firms made me offers, so I'll do that. I have a lot of debt. And then I got much more into it than I ever thought I would. And it was a hard choice to leave. And but at some point around year 5, I looked around and was like, wait, why am I one of the last people standing?
Well, because there's an 80% exit rate by year 5. So
I was like, you guys seemed so into it. What's going on? So it does not shake out the way you think it's going to in law school.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It's totally unpredictable. You find out people are doing all kinds of crazy things. And again, good for them,
Yeah.
And good for the people who decide to stay and be partner that you never would have expected to be partners. Something's working. So great.
Yeah.
For people who just really don't know, do you have any suggestions on how to figure their life and their career out? Any books, resources, people to listen to? Who do you send people to?
Well, I did mention the ABA oh my gosh, I'm messing up my own website. It's the ABA Legal Career Central, so abalcc.org. There are tons of resources on there, and we even have a career choice series, and it is practicing attorneys talking about their day-to-day life in different practice areas, and we have government, lawyers, law firm lawyers, different practice areas. We have people who've done JAG. There's a huge variety out there, and we are constantly creating resources so that people can have them. And just to be clear, I'm the chair of the board. It's an unpaid position. We're not getting paid for this content. We are just people who care about getting the content out there for people who want it. So I'm not promoting it because there's some benefit to me. I'm promoting it because I think it's really valuable, and that's why we all volunteer to do it. So I think that site, and it's really meant for everyone across the board. If you're senior, if you're thinking about retiring, but you want to keep practicing, there's resources, there's everything. So that's a great site. Like we talked about, going to conferences, I think that's really great. Any area you think you might be interested in, whether even like you said, if it's an online CLE, that is a good place to start. And then volunteer in a general organization. Like if you're in San Francisco, you can get involved with the San Francisco Bar Association. And if you start volunteering on events or volunteering on a committee, you're going to start meeting people and in a natural way be able to talk to them and find out about their career. And even also if you're in law school, getting involved in some organizations in law school and finding out what other people are interested in. I think all those things where you're collecting information and also at the same time finding out what is a viable option for you, that's all going to be helpful.
Awesome. Well, on that note, tell us a little bit about the life of a legal recruiter. What do you do all day? I mean, I've heard you just go get manicures and then people call you and say like, oh, we got hired, like, great, you get a commission. How does this work?
I mean, it is ideal when, you don't have to really do anything and something really amazing happens, but that's not really how it works. But what I love about my job is how varied it is. So sometimes, and it depends just where I am with different searches, where different candidates are at. So sometimes I'm focused on a couple searches and I'm looking for attorneys who could be a fit, and I'm calling them and I'm talking to them. And then sometimes I talk to an attorney who might not be interested in that search, but has other career goals that I'm able to help them with. So you kind of never know what's going to happen when you call someone. I'm out pitching clients a lot, which I really like. So it's a big mix. And sometimes attorneys who aren't sure what their next move is, they contact me and I'm meeting with them to figure out, what their goals are and how I can help them. And then if I'm not busy doing actual recruiting work, I'm often writing articles. I speak at a lot of conferences. And like I said, I have the board of directors and we're always working on different projects and managing that. And then at night, I'm doing stand-up comedy. So I have to say, I don't usually have time for a manicure, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe I got bad information on what legal recruiters do all day.
Well, one thing that I do think is great about legal recruiting is you can put as much time into it as you want. So if you are really busy with other things, I mean, sometimes I'm traveling for comedy and I'm able to work remotely. But, I might work more than some other people who have the same job. And that's one of the things that's really great about it is flexible depending on who you are and what your goals are. So I'm really into it. I run my own business. I might be putting more time into it than someone else, but I think it's a really great career in terms of how flexible it is for different people with different goals.
Yeah, and I think for a certain personality type, it sounds great. I mean, the reality is you do a lot of business development. Obviously, you're running a business. But the reality is, like, most lawyers end up doing some sort of business development work, whether it's big law, solo practice, fundraising in a nonprofit. And you actually wrote a really interesting article we will link to about how the lawyer personality just isn't great for what business development requires. So tell me more about why this is and what people can do to overcome these tendencies and basically get better at selling things.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a little bit that lawyers tend to be much more risk averse than the general population. So that's part of it. And then, especially as you start practicing law, it's the idea of what is a success and what is a failure when you're practicing law is really different than what it is in sales. So if you're an associate and you write a memo and it's almost perfect, but you have one really important rule incorrect, that's a huge mistake. That's kind of a fail, right? And so one mistake will be a failure. Whereas if you're doing anything in sales or business development, say you call 30 people and 2 people want to talk to you and 1 person wants to work with you, that is a win.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
because
good ratio.
you got business. And I was talking to a lawyer I know, and he's like, I don't understand how you do recruiting. It's so hard. Say you send out 100 emails, you might only get like 3 responses. That is so demoralizing. And I'm like, well, I don't want 100 responses. I don't have time to talk to 100 people. I'm trying to find the right people. And 3 responses is a win. And I think, lawyers do get kind of beat down in their job. It's really, it's a job where clients are looking for perfection, partners are looking for perfection. And so the idea of failure becomes really demoralizing. And if you're going to do anything in sales or business development, you really need to mentally build in rejection as part of the process. Mm-hmm. And the person I heard this phrased best from is a professional stand-up comic who had heard when he was a young comic that, I don't remember what the number was, but something like you can't be good until you've bombed 1,000 times. Like It's not possible, which is true. And so he's like, okay, great. So he basically put up a poster in his apartment, and every time he bombed, he came and checked a bomb off on this, thing where he was keeping track of it. And so there's nothing worse than bombing. I mean, it's really demoralizing.
Particularly again and again and again.
Honestly, it is really. It will give you thick skin for everything else you do in life. But, when you reframe it so that it shows you can actually see that you're getting closer to your goal, and this is just a necessary step, right? It's like training for a marathon and you've never run before. You have to be able to run 3 miles before you can run 20 miles. And so you're checking off your progress along the way. And, if you make 3 phone calls to try to get some business and all of those people kind of reject you or say no, check that off, because it means you're closer to getting to yes, because it's a numbers game. And you're never going to bat 1,000 for business development. So finding a way to reframe it mentally, I think, goes such a long way. It's really huge. And honestly, the minute you have your first success and like you get that first client, that high just takes over all those failures that you had, and it makes you more resilient for the next time that you have it.
I literally remember like the first time someone bought something from us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't looking pretty at that point, and like even objectively speaking, that really shouldn't have made that much difference because it wasn't that big of a deal. But there was something I'll never forget the moment of sitting in this coffee shop and actually having a conversation about like, well, should I just like, pull the plug on this completely? Like nobody's buying this thing that we made that's so awesome. And, like really having that conversation. In the middle of the conversation, I get this email, like somebody signed up for like one thing. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's such a high. I mean, and that will really, I think one thing lawyers don't understand is that one high will really keep, that's how especially for stand-up, like all I need is one really amazing show every once in a while, and it will get me through all the awful ones, because there's kind of nothing that matches that, and you don't get that without having some lows. It's just not possible.
Exactly.
And if you're scared of lows, you're not going to be able to do anything. And, every lawyer has gone through those lows and had to overcome things. I think it's just that for people that are coming from a more academic background, those lows they feel less public, right? Like maybe you didn't get a grade you wanted on a test and you really had to learn how to do better next time. But it just kind of feels less public than calling someone and having them say no. But also keeping in mind, like you might call someone and they might say no now, but they might say yes in 6 months.
Yeah,
and you kind of never know. And so looking at it as establishing a relationship with someone, even if it's not an immediate yes, can be really helpful. And if you're really, really uncomfortable putting yourself out there, which I think a lot of people are, do something else unrelated to work that is very scary to you. Because if you can wrap your head around being scared of something, doing it anyway, even failing and realizing that you're still fine, getting through that, it's almost like training a muscle and you'll be able to apply it. And I realize I do that because I do very outward facing things. You know, I'm always calling people, I'm pitching business, I'm looking for candidates, and then I'm going out and trying new material on stage and performing in front of different audiences and traveling. And it can be really rough, but I think back to high school, I was a diver and I was very successful, but you never learn a new dive without completely injuring yourself first. Like I used to smack on my back over and over. I had bruises on my shoulders. I had cuts on my arms. And you just do that until you learn how to do the dive right. And then you can start winning meets. And it's kind of that same concept. And so anything you can draw on where you've gotten through something difficult is going to help you at work. And so if you're not ready to start by like pitching clients right away and you're just too paralyzed by it, make a list of everything you're scared of. Maybe you're scared of singing and you go take a private singing class or something. Just, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it just makes you learn how to deal with those feelings and still keep going, which is really 90% of sales or putting yourself out there.
No, I agree. And I typically have had some sort of skill that I was working on that I sucked at initially. So I'd been snowboarding for many years and then suddenly I decided I was going to switch to skiing, which is really humbling. And you have to start at the beginning and you have to take lessons. And you have to obviously fall down and you probably get hurt. And you're like, God, why don't I just go back to this thing I already know how to do? Yeah. And I basically just wouldn't let myself do it for an entire season until I learned to ski, or I'd take boxing classes and things like that because it's like, well, this is kind of weird and frustrating and scary. Why don't I just do it when there's actually no real downside?
Yeah. And then you just getting used to those feelings is a lot of it. And someone gave me advice when I was thinking about starting my own firm. She was like, the only reason people don't go out on their own is they're scared of putting themselves out there. But if you do stand-up comedy, you're already doing that every single night.
You're pretty well qualified.
She's like, it is crazy to me that you would ever not run your own business because you are already doing what everyone else is scared of. And it was such a helpful way of thinking about it because it's true. On the side, I do something that is much more kind of like terrifying or stressful. And so starting my own business was really not a big deal, but it's because I had done something else on the side. So I really encourage people to carve out some kind of space or time to do something that makes them uncomfortable and kind of learn how to deal with it. So it's less of a big deal when you start doing something at work that's a little bit frightening.
I think that's a great point. And unfortunately with that, we are out of time. So Liz, speaking of your business, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
My website is stonelegalsearch.com. All my contact information is on there. And like I said, also check out the ABA Legal Career Central website. That one is great too. Thanks so much, Allison.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You too. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Typically, our episodes are out on Monday. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Allison at Lee@Law School Toolbox or Allison at lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. And if you're looking for career help, check out our career subsite, careerdicta.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.